Evening, everybody. This is the webinar in our series of advisement sessions for the Department of History graduate program. Thanks for being here. I see Desiree, Elizabeth, Joshua, Shannon online. I'm sure a couple more people are going to join us. If you can hear me, just write a quick note in the chat box so that I know the audio is working. Tonight's webinar is a bit something special because we are talking about the public history track, and for that I decided to bring in an expert, and that is Professor Granada, who will be sharing the presentation with me tonight. So I want to thank her for taking the time to be here.
Hello, everybody. Looking forward to it.
Okay, now let me see, is everyone responding? Yes, you can all hear me. Out of curiosity, did you guys hear music on this channel before we started? Because that would have been great. That was the idea. No, no one heard it. Okay, so I still have to work on the technology for this. I'm still figuring this out. Now let's get started. As you know, I'm recording this, so if you want to follow up on any of this information, you want to go back and see what we exactly talked about, or you want to recommend this to others, I will send out the link to the recording later tonight, and then you have access to it and can use it for reference purposes. So we'll talk about the public history track tonight, and that will begin with us first identifying what exactly makes public history different from the thesis track or the exam route on the study plan. We'll talk about the exact meaning and I'd say the purpose of public history. We'll identify some of the different kinds of public history that you can do, and specifically those that you can complete a culminating experience in our program. We'll talk about some of the job employment possibilities for public historians, where they work. Then we give you some key questions you can consider when you ponder what kind of projects would be right for you to complete. And then we'll give you some specific details on how to complete an oral history project, how to complete an exhibition, how to complete a thesis, and then we'll talk a little bit about the questions that you have and about some other less common projects that students can complete in public history. If at any point you have a question, type it in the chat box on the lower right corner. Most of you already are familiar with this, and I will check in there occasionally to make sure that I don't miss anything that you point out. Professor Granada and I will sort of go back and forth on some of these things, so this will have a bit more of a conversational flow. I see now Kevin has joined us as well. Hi, Kevin. So let's go on to the study plan. As you know, there is a webinar on the study plan that I offered earlier this academic year. I think it was November. I will offer another webinar on the study plan on the second Monday of April. So if you're still a little unclear what the study plan really is and what you need to do for it, the second Monday in April, 9 o'clock, same time, same place, I will talk about that. For now, let me just clarify that the public history route has a separate study plan, and it looks different from the thesis or the exam in a couple of very important ways. First of all, every public history graduate student needs to complete the 506 public history seminar. And that is the seminar that replaces the research seminar that you're familiar with on the thesis or exam track. Second, when it comes to your 400 level electives, there are at least 2 that you need to take from the oral and public history catalog, and that is the courses that range from History 492 to 494. And then one of the other important differences on the public history study plan is the large variety of final culminating experiences. And there are essentially 3 ways in which you can complete your public history masters. First, there's the possibility of combining 3 units of internship with 3 units of project. Second, you can complete 6 units of project. And third, you can actually also write a thesis on the public history track. This is a little confusing, but once we talk about the nature of the public history track, it will make a little more sense to you, I'm sure. You may wonder why it is possible to complete the MA with 3 units of project and with 6 units of project. That has a lot to do with the kind of choices you make with your other courses. If you have a lot of other courses you want to take, but you also really want to put in that internship, then you may run out of room on your study plan to count these units, and then reducing the unit load on the project to 3 is a good idea. If that is not the case, you may not have had the opportunity to take an internship, or the internship perfectly completed your 500 level elective, then 6 units of projects is a sound solution. So that really sort of depends on how you fill your course schedule over the course of your time here with us. So that's the basics on the difference in the study plan. Now, we usually want people to stick to the study plan they commit to when they first come to me and get classified. But if you change your mind, if you're currently a thesis student or an exam student, and you want to switch to public history, and by the differences listed here, that is still a reasonable choice, we of course will accommodate you. We are here to make your MA the best MA that you can accomplish, and so we will of course make that change. But it is always a good idea to think very hard and thoroughly about your study plan commitment when you first come to me and get the study plan set up. So I am now going to hand this over to Professor Granada. She will tell you a little bit more about the different kinds of public history that you can do at Fullerton.
Sure. So in the broadest sense of the term, when we talk about public history, we're making a distinction between history that's done in an academic or educational setting and history where you as a professional historian are working out in the field in a variety of different ways. In our program here, we have several different strengths in public history. And those you see listed here on the slide. Of course, because of our Center for Oral and Public History, many of our students will do oral history projects because of our significant strengths in exhibition design with several faculty who have expertise in that, especially Dr. Kothra. Our public historians will be involved, really from hands-on working on exhibition design and implementation. We have students, especially when it comes to doing internships, working a lot in archives and libraries, both here on campus, that would be at our Center for Oral and Public History, but also off campus at a variety of archives and libraries. And then increasingly, we have students involved with a variety of different historic preservation projects. And what that means is we might partner, for example, with the National Park Service and work on projects related to historical preservation, in particular national park sites, for example, that students might do work like that as part of an internship.
Okay, so one of the interesting things about public history is the wide variety of occupations that you can go into, making very direct use of your historical skills. You can of course work as an archivist or a records manager, as a contract historian, but as you see in the list here, there's a lot of things that you can do as a public historian that really directly employ your historical skills. And I can tell you, just from a sort of a brief glance at the occupations that our recent graduates have taken, that all of these things actually happen. This is not just a remote responsibility. Remote possibility. Sorry, I just recently spoke with a public history graduate who is now employed by the federal government, and she's an historian that travels out of Hawaii to World War II era airplane crash sites, and writes reports on soldiers missing in action back from World War II. That sounds like a really exciting job, and by her own account, she considers herself very well paid. So these jobs are out there. They're in the public sector and in the private sector.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add in the private sector we have two, oh, sorry, Volker, I was just going to say in the private sector we have two recent graduates working, for example, doing historical research for Wells Fargo Bank. You know, so it's a really wonderful range.
Right, and if you are entrepreneurial in spirit, you can also find ways of becoming self-employed as a public historian. So that possibility exists too. It takes a lot more creativity and ingenuity to get that started. Not that being an employee is not creative, but to come up with your own type of business is certainly another possibility. Now, the question is, of course, for you, what kind of project should you complete? And there's a couple of questions that I think you should ask yourself. First, do you enjoy research? Do you like working in the archives? Do you like handling documents? Maybe working on an archival project is actually the right thing for you to do. Do you enjoy writing? Is this really something that drives you in the program, that motivated you to take the History MA in the first place? Then maybe you want to write a thesis. I had a student who wrote a thesis on the how do I put this? On the Maritime Museums of California and their representation of coastal labor. And it was a fantastic thesis, really interesting, a really good study of public history sites in California. He really enjoyed the writing process, and that's what he did. If you enjoy working with artifacts, if you enjoy hunting down artifacts, then clearly the exhibits are the proper route for you. If you like teamwork, then the exhibits again work really well, because this is something where you really have to work with other people and coordinate well. If you enjoy talking to people, I guess you see where this is going, then oral histories are your choice. And then ultimately the other question is, do you already have specific career plans where a project would really fit in? Some of our students come in, they already are volunteering for an archive. I know Kevin here is listening. He is regularly volunteering in archives. So for him, there's already a project waiting for him. Other students have already worked in museums, and for them, the exhibit is the obvious choice to take. Cora, do you have anything to add here?
No, I mean, I guess one thing I might say is one distinction I sometimes advise students when they're deciding on internships is, do you see yourself as the type of person who likes to work in the public, interacting with people, or behind the scenes? And we have public history internships related to both of those. Certainly I would see the archival and library work. Making a detailed finding aid can be lonely work, but for some people that's really the type of work that they enjoy, as opposed to those who might be working in museum education or publicity, right? So that's, I think, a similar distinction to what you have here on the list, but also it may be a way to think about it.
I think that's also one of the strengths of public history, that it really allows people of very different skills and very different talents to do different kinds of work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now let's get to a specific example of how do you complete, say, an oral history project. And here, I think Professor Granada and I will go back and forth, seeing who has relevant points to add. The first choice you have to make, and that is true whether you do an oral history project or an exhibit or a thesis, is to identify the field that you really want to work in. I think it's obvious that oral histories are probably not a good choice if you're working in European medieval history. Unless, of course, and there's always another possibility, there is a dramatic historiographical debate that raged in the 1970s, and you want to talk with the historians and their experiences, remembering that. Not sure that will make the most exciting oral history project, but I think as a rule of thumb, you could say that oral history projects are best for topics where you can actually find eyewitnesses that can tell you something about it. In the case of oral history projects, the next question then is, can you identify a topic that has sort of a coordinated theme to it, and then can you identify narrators? To come up with an oral history project and not know who you could possibly talk to, I think for obvious reasons, stops that project in the tracks. Do you agree with me there, Cora?
Definitely, very much so. You certainly would want to design a project where the numbers would give and take, but you want to imagine about at least six narrators that you've identified who are willing to speak with you, who are appropriate for your particular topic.
You want to do this early in the program. Just because you're in your first semester doesn't mean that you can't be talking about your final project. If you think that you are too junior to talk about your culminating experience, that's the wrong attitude. You can talk about your ideas as soon as you have it, as soon as they come to mind. Find faculty that seem qualified, that seem interested. See who works with you, who wants to work with you, where the personalities click. And so selecting a committee should happen at about 18 units, but can happen as early as 6 units. Of course, the most important person in your committee is the chair. And that chair needs to be a faculty member in the Department of History. You will need to get your forms, and those are those white little sheets that you see here on the presentation, from the Department of History graduate secretary, that is Lynn Azar, and occasionally when Lynn Azar is assigned to other duties, Rachel Amaro, and then you deliver these documents and then you ask people to be your chair or your readers. The two readers need to be Cal State Fullerton faculty, but they don't need to be from the history department. And you should know that historians work all over campus. Of course, in the humanities and social sciences, you can find historians in liberal studies, in the ethnic studies departments, but even our kinesiology department has 2 sports historians. You can also think about adding an additional reader from a different university and a different department. If you know someone who's a real authority in your field and you were able to network with her or him, and you add them as a 4th reader, that can really strengthen the profile of your work. Cora,
if I could add, yeah, sure.
Yes.
I mean, I think what you said is definitely right on. I would just add that I think it's really important as you're rounding out the other committee members, the readers, that you really follow the guidance and advice of your chair. Start with selecting your committee chair, and this would be for any project, not just the oral history project. Sometimes we see students kind of selecting professors who they like, who they've taken classes with, but they might not necessarily have the right expertise for the project that you have in mind, right? So your chair can really give you guidance, and it may be that this is a person you haven't taken coursework with yet, and the earlier you have the conversation, then you can reach out to that person. But obviously, personality matters. You're going to interact with the committee, but that shouldn't be the overriding factor, right?
No. You do want to keep in mind also that topical knowledge and expertise is important. So it's a good idea to, say, pick a California historian if you do an oral history project centered on California. But that history, first and foremost, is a matter of methodology. So that people who are not necessarily experts on your topic can still ask really good questions. So while it's a good idea to have a chair who really knows what you are going to write about, sometimes it's good to have readers that are not necessarily, first and foremost interested in California history. So they can they can offer you questions that are maybe more unexpected, and can sometimes at first sight appear really innocent, but ultimately really challenge you and test your ideas in ways that people that know the field may not. So once you have determined your committee, the question is, when do you sign up for your 597 units? And those are the units assigned to your project. For that, again, you need a permit slip, and that's that paper you see there on the right. It's deliberately small because this is actually not the right paper, but it kind of looks like that. And if you go to Rachel Amaro or Lynn Azar, they will give you that permit. You cannot just go online and sign up for 597 as if it was just another course, because it isn't. It's what we call a supervision course, and that needs to be authorized. Now, before you sign up for these 597 units, you will need this. Well, the reason you need this permit is because we want to make sure that you're ready to take on the project. And for an oral history project, that means, have you completed your prospectus? And that is down there. Point F should have come up a little earlier. The prospectus for a project is the foundation on which you work, the foundation on which you agree with the committee. That should include a discussion of historiography. It should discuss the kind of questions you would ask, and of course it should identify the narrators that you want to talk to. That prospectus is usually a prerequisite for the 597 units. So you can't just impromptu decide to sign up for project units without having done this. So think ahead, and in the semester, certainly by the semester before the project, you should be working on that prospectus. A big and important part of the preparation for the oral history project is what is called the Institutional Review Board. And Professor Granada will tell you more about this.
Sure. This is a university-wide body that governs research across the university that relates to using human subjects as subjects of historical research. And so if you are going to do an oral history project, you are doing human subject research. So your project needs to go through what we call the IRB, or Institutional Review Board. Now, it sounds like an extra level of bureaucracy, but the good news is that we already, our department and our Center for Oral and Public History has a pre-existing agreement with our university IRB. They recognize that we use oral history best practices. They've already approved our various legal release forms. And so the Center for Oral and Public History can really help you go through that IRB review process pretty quickly. But what we do want is for students to have submitted. What you do is there's an Institutional Review Board website that you can access from the main campus website. There's a form there. You fill it out. Oops.
You okay?
Sorry, I somehow got disconnected here. I see you guys again. So as I was saying, there's a form that you fill out, you submit it, and usually within a couple of weeks you hear back from the IRB office about whether it was approved. Just get guidance from Dr. Fusakis and myself and from the Center for Oral and Public History, and we'll assist you with this process. But we want you to have submitted your IRB paperwork at the same time that you're working on your prospectus, so that when your prospectus gets approved by your committee, you're ready to hit the ground running, because you cannot conduct an interview until you've received that IRB approval.
And if you do conduct an interview without that IRB approval, you will not be allowed to use it, right? So that then will become simply your private affair, and that's not that's undermining your work. So even though this may seem like a bureaucratic nuisance, it's absolutely essential for you to properly complete your project. I should also point out that, of course, for any oral history project, you should have ideally completed a class
Yeah.
that has introduced you to the methods of oral history. Oral histories are not just interviews; they're not just discussions with people who saw something. There's a lot more to it, and I think at the very least you should have attended a workshop, but ideally you should have taken a class that either deals with oral histories specific to a topic or specifically with oral histories as a method.
Yeah, if I could jump in there, we are offering oral history classes now every semester. So usually I offer one semester, and Dr. Fusekis offers one another semester. And those are History 493A. And it's not listed in the catalog because it's what's called a special, but it will be listed soon, which is 493C. So one is oral history with a U.S. history focus, that's Fusekis' class, and one is U.S. history with a European and world focus, and that's my class. And really, to do an oral history project, it is important to have taken one of those classes. And often the oral history projects grow out of the interviews you do in those classes.
You can also ask any faculty who is familiar with oral history projects for an oral history project proposal guide or a model. So you can see what an oral history project proposal should really look like. Essentially, what is different here from, say, a thesis proposal or a thesis prospectus is that you don't have a central research question and hypothesis. Because, and Professor Granado will correct me if I'm wrong here, the idea of an oral history project is to create a body of evidence that can be read and studied with a variety of different possible historical questions and research interests, and be of use to future historians.
Yes, I mean we do want you in your historiography and then later in the final deliverable of the final project to be able to synthesize the broader significance of the interviews that you've done. But it is different from a thesis in the sense that you do some analysis and synthesis, but then the bulk of the project are the interviews themselves.
So to summarize here, by 18 units, you should have your committee put together. Before you sign up for your project units, make sure that you have your prospectus done and that you've dealt with the institutional review board. And then comes the question, what do you ultimately have to deliver with the oral history project? And that generally includes the oral history recordings that you completed, abstracts of these interviews. Typically, I believe included are also field notes. That term begins to make no sense once you've taken a class on oral histories. They basically describe the settings and the circumstances under which the interview took place. And I believe they also include oral history transcripts. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And then, just as importantly, there is an introduction to your oral history collection. That is the essay part of the project, in which you historicize, contextualize, and sort of lay out the significance of the collection that you created. What's the timeline for an oral history project? Well, first comes your research and your prospectus development. That should take place, as I said earlier, before 24 units are completed, so that you can focus on the interviews themselves in your last 6 units. The prospectus defense should happen ideally before you enroll in your 597 units. Then come the interviews, the transcription, the writing of the abstracts, field notes, and then you will complete this culminating experience with a defense of your oral history collection, and that only has to happen by the end of the semester in which you plan to graduate. For those of you who had attended the thesis track webinar, you know that can be a much tighter timeline, And so here you have time until basically grades are due for the semester. Cora, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you've hit on everything. I would just say, yeah, that with the thesis, the university has its own imposed earlier deadlines of when you have to submit it to the Graduate Studies Office. But with the projects, that deadline doesn't exist. So it does give you a little bit more flexibility, that especially during your final semester, to really have the whole semester to wrap it up.
Mm-hmm. Now, next we will talk about the exhibition. And if it's okay, I will ask Professor Granada to talk maybe about some of the things that are different in thinking about an exhibit to the extent that it differs from an oral history project.
Sure. So here you definitely would want to be working especially closely with our expert on exhibition design, Dr. Kothra, and ideally have taken courses with him. Just like with the oral history project, of course, you would want to consider the field and the topic of the type of exhibition that you'd want to do for a culminating project. And identify the feasibility of it in terms of artifacts, their availability, images, their availability, and think about what final product you'd want to display the exhibition in and what form. Just like with oh, did you want to add something, Volker?
No, go ahead. No,
Okay.
go ahead.
Sure. I was going to say, just like with the other projects, you'd want to select a committee with a chair who has expertise either in exhibition design or in the particular field or topic that you'd want, in addition to the two readers. That area is similar with the similar option of having an outside reader. And here again, I'd want to encourage you to think flexibly, because we have experts in museum studies in the anthropology department, for example, right? So you might think broadly about people who can be members of your committee for an exhibition. Go ahead, Volker.
Yes, again here it's important that you start thinking about these things early so that you can work on the prospectus for your exhibit before you start signing up for the 597 units. So remember, there's always a paper trail to complete along with these culminating experiences. Signing up your committee members is not an informal process but a formal one. Getting the permission and authorization to take the supervision units 597 is a formal process, and that means you need to complete the formalities. That is, write a prospectus that addresses the historiography, the questions, and the ways in which you imagine an exhibit to take shape under your prospectus. The deliverables, for the exhibition can vary quite a bit, and I'm going to let Professor Granada tell a little bit more about this.
Sure. So we have had students have culminating projects, exhibition projects, take a variety of different forms. Ideally, of course, you can participate in constructing your actual physical exhibit. Now, that involves being able to identify a space, whether it's on or off campus, and that can take some logistics, and we can help you a bit with that and have ongoing relationships with certain entities, whether it's our Fullerton Arboretum or the Pollock Library exhibition spaces, to do that. So one deliverable is a physical exhibit plus a write-up that is a scholarly analysis, sort of the equivalent of an exhibition catalog, in addition to your physical exhibit. The second option, knowing that it isn't always feasible to, for space limitations, to actually complete the physical exhibition, students can also do a very detailed exhibition mock-up where they're actually writing up, the labels, pretty much everything but putting the items up, writing a list of artifacts, and again, a scholarly analysis, catalog text as well. And then the third variation that students have done, and we'll be doing increasingly more of because we're hiring 2 experts in digital history, and that is to do digital exhibitions, online exhibitions. And that, again, would come with a scholarly analysis along with the actual digital exhibition. So you have some options, but the key here is to be sure to consult early with our faculty experts on what the relevant deliverables would be for your case or can be for your case in particular. I would say those 2 faculty being Dr. Cothra and Dr. Cornell Brown.
I'm going to go back a slide because someone in the audience wanted to see again the lineup here for the completion of the exhibit. Cora, would you say that it's particularly useful to have completed an internship when it comes to doing the exhibit because it connects you with museums?
I think that can be a very, very important thing to do. I think it's also very useful to have taken one of Dr. Cothra's, the practicum in public history, which often involves working hands-on with an exhibition project here on campus. So without having had that kind of background, jumping into the culminating project would be pretty challenging.
Yes, the little that I learned about exhibits as a non-public historian is that it really is a challenge combining both academic scholarship and a real appreciation for building a narrative in a space that invites people to walk in and sort of immerse themselves.
Right.
That seems like a difficult thing to do.
Right, and it's more than just a sort of antiquarian sort of excitement about the artifacts, right? You have to sort of justify what is the argument of this exhibition and what is it adding to our scholarly knowledge, just like you would in a traditional thesis, right? But you're doing it in a material culture format.
Yeah. Okay, now the timeline for the exhibit is again comparable to other projects. You need to start your research and your prospectus development before you complete your 24 units so that you don't fall behind in your last semester. You should have your prospectus defended before you sign up for your 597 units. The artifacts and image collection, I say here should happen then, but it should probably have started long before then. Because unless you have an idea where your materials come from, it's probably a risky undertaking to commit to an exhibit in the first place. So exhibit design and setup certainly are the last steps in the process. And just like the oral history project, defense or presentation of the exhibit only has to happen by the end of this semester. So you have until the day that grades are due. Now, next I want to introduce you to the public history thesis. So here you have an essay, a larger research essay that deals specifically with public history. So this can be a thesis on aspects of historical presentation, historical preservation. It can draw on your own research of public history exhibits or public history sites. You want to identify your field, your topic, and here, more specifically than in the case of an oral history project, you need to come up with a question. The way you can test whether you have a question is to start your summary of your thesis with "I argue." If you can say that you are arguing something, you have a hypothesis, that means you have a question. Too often you'll find yourself curious and excited about a topic, but not sure what to ask of it. And then you will find yourself in your prospectus defense saying that you want to talk about or you want to write about something. But that generally is not the same as having a question or having a hypothesis. So that's really I think the crux of a thesis, knowing what to ask and being able to propose a possible argument, a possible response to that. Selecting a committee, again, should happen early. You can formally create the committee at 18 units, but you can establish a chair and identify your readers as early as you like. Again, think about the option of adding faculty from other universities to your thesis committee. I especially encourage students who are very, very committed to continuing to PhD programs to think about this, because the endorsement and support of somebody who is really an authority in your field for your MA, I think really strengthens your application if you move on to a PhD program afterwards. Remember once again that you need to work on the prospectus before you sign up for your 598 units. That means you need to deal with the historiography in your thesis, and that means not just summarize some books and then move on to your own work, but engage with the historiography. Identify the question, try out a hypothesis. You don't know that it's true, but you are venturing a guess. That's the best you can do. And then you need to talk about your method. How are you going to try to answer that question and to prove that hypothesis? Again, remember that you can ask any faculty member, but certainly me, for a thesis proposal guide that tells you step by step what should be included here. As for the deliverables, oh, sorry, Cora, you wanted to add something.
Sure. I was going to just add a couple of things.
Yeah.
One is that one thing that I've noticed is that I've had a few graduate students write public history theses, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this option kind of has come from you guys, the students. It's sort of by popular demand. You know, we had students working on the public history track, and many of them saying they wanted to write theses rather than projects. But one issue that's come up is that, you know, the coursework that you take leading up to this, you take the 506, the Seminar on Public History, rather than the students on the traditional track take a research seminar, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
You want to be aware of that if you're going to choose this public thesis option, public history thesis option, because you haven't taken a research seminar, which for the non-public history track students who write thesis becomes a really important class to help them in this process. So there might be a little bit of catch-up work, I guess, is what I'm saying, or you might have your advisor say, oh, maybe you should go back and take, you know, one of the research courses. You know, we don't want to add additional unnecessary coursework, but just be aware that the 506 isn't always going to prepare you for doing a traditional thesis.
That is a very good point. And here you want to keep in mind that you have a 500 level elective, or for that matter, can turn any of your 400 level elective courses into a 500 level elective class. So if you already completed an internship, which would have filled your 500 level elective slot, then make one of your 400 level elective classes a research seminar. There, of course, you need to then also consider scheduling, because the research seminars are offered once a year. So if you want to make sure that you catch a U.S. history research seminar, that only happens in the fall. So planning ahead and really thinking about where you want to go makes all the difference in the world. And that will allow you to then incorporate an internship, a research seminar, your 400 level oral public history electives, and take care of all those things if you plan it right and you think thoroughly about what you want to do with this. Mm-hmm. Now, as for the deliverables, they are certainly comparable to the regular thesis. You need to write your draft. You need to consult with your chair on the chapters. and eventually then share your overall draft with the committee. I want to again remind you that the Office of Graduate Studies offers a thesis manual that gives you all the rules for formatting that you have to abide by if you want to graduate. So if you go to the website of the Office of Graduate Studies, and this presentation has a hyperlink to it. I'm not sure that it actually works in this presentation mode, but even if you were to simply Google Cal State Fullerton Office of Graduate Studies, you would instantly get to the site where they offer you the thesis manual. You can prepare yourself and avoid all sorts of frustrations in the last couple of days, because the timeline for the thesis can be really tough. You need to, of course, have thought well ahead and done your research into prospectus development before you have completed 24 units, so that you don't shorten your last semester on the thesis by still tinkering with your prospectus. And of course, you can divide your 6 units of the thesis across 2 semesters. There's all sorts of different variations that are discussed when we did the webinar on the thesis track. You need to defend your prospectus and then write your thesis. Probably research and writing will always sort of go hand in hand. Ideally, you will want to do research first and then do your writing. But in practice, I think it always turns out to be a fairly dialectical process. Submit your thesis to the chair, then submit the thesis to the readers after the chair's approval, and then defend your thesis for the Office of Graduate Studies deadline, which I just sent out via email the other day, and I think it's April 20th or something around that time this semester. So it's considerably before the day that grades are due. Now, if you want to think...
April 24th.
April 24th, there you go. So imagine, if you want to submit your thesis by April 24th, that means you need to have it defended successfully to the entire committee probably 2 days before, so that you can iron out any kinks or errors that the committee may ask you to fix, or any formatting issues that you need to address. If you want to defend by April 22nd, you need to aim for April 15th, because it's not always easy to get all committee members scheduled on the day that you would like them to meet, because all sorts of things happen in professors' lives, and they have all sorts of committees and theses committees to attend to. So, if you want your April 22nd date, you may not get it. So try to aim for an earlier one. Then give your readers time to read the thesis. So go back another week at the least, from April 15th to April 8th. The chair needs probably at least 2 weeks to read and make comments on the thesis. So that puts you into late March. And you can already see how little time there really is in the final semester to write and complete your entire thesis. And that is why so very often even the best prepared students find themselves with a summer graduation or with an extension into fall. And there is no shame in that. You just need to know that there is a tight deadline. And if you want to really get it all done in that semester, you need to. Now I jumped up. Sorry. Just do this a little more smoothly here. No, that was not smooth at all. What's happening? Bear with me. Okay. So, finally, there are a few other ways in which you can complete a project in oral and public history. And I think I will let Professor Granada say a little bit more about those options.
Sure. These are our least common options, but they do exist, so I wanted to say a few words about them. And this is, again, for a specialized student who has had quite a bit of internship or experience in archives, for example, may want to do a culminating project that is archival in nature. And what we would suggest there is that you would work with the appropriate faculty member on a case-by-case basis, because it's going to be really tailored to your particular experiences. But if you've been working quite a bit in a particular archive and have had done extensive work creating an extensive database or a finding aid that you want to turn into a culminating project, that is something that you can work on a case-by-case basis. Similar with historic preservation projects, we have had students in the past in various ways be involved with historic preservation projects with relationships that our department has had with the National Park Service. We're right now in the process of finalizing a partnership with Joshua Tree, where students could potentially go out to Joshua Tree and work on a variety of different historical preservation projects there. And again, this might be something that would start as an internship that you would do, but then could grow into a culminating project where you might draft a proposal for a historic landmark recognition, for example, for a particular historical site. And again, that would be something you could arrange as a case-by-case basis. For historical preservation, our professor, Dr. Margie Cornell Brown, is an expert in that area, so she would be certainly a good faculty member to talk to about that.
Thank you. I think we've covered at least the basics of the public history track. I'm sure there are a couple of questions that you have. So now is a good time to type those into the chat box down there.